Okay, in this video, we are going to also find the vertex, but this time also the intercepts and the domain and range of a quadratic function. And we are going to graph it at the end. All right, let's first find the vertex. In order to find the vertex, we're just going to open Desmos calculator. Let me clear everything here. And then we want to find the value of a and b. A is the number in front of x squared. In this case, that's 2. And b is the number in front of x, which is 8. The formula for h, which is the x coordinate of the vertex, is negative b divided by 2a. That's going to be negative 2. All right, now that we know that the x coordinate is negative 2, we find the y coordinate by just plugging in whatever we got here into our f of x formula. Instead of x, we're going to replace it with parentheses. And it is actually more important here because the x value that you are about to substitute, we just got, the h value, is negative. That's why we need parentheses. It's very important. Okay, now we are ready to plug in whatever x value we need to figure out. So for example, negative 2 is the one that we definitely want to figure out, and that gives us negative 8. Okay, that's the vertex. I'm also going to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept happens when x equals 0. And when you are plugging 0 for x, and in other words, just sticking that 0 in the empty parentheses, you get 0. And 0, 0 would be the y-intercept. To find the x-intercepts, that's more difficult because what you need to do is try to factor and then use zero factor property. In this case, because the value of c, which is like the number, right, it's missing, we can factor by just using GCF, greatest common factor. How do we do that? Okay, we've got 2x squared. Think of x squared as x times x plus 8, which I'm going to write as 2 times 4 times x. What do they share? Well, we can see that they share a 2 and they share an x. And that's your GCF. We can go ahead and take that out. And then in parentheses, we're going to write what's left. From the first term, once you take out 2 and x, the other x will be left, plus the second term, you take out 2 and x, and 4 will be left, okay? Once you do that, you're going to make this equal to 0 and use zero factor property. What does that mean? Well, you're going to have two factors here, 2x and x plus 4. If you have two numbers that are multiplied, give you 0, that means either one of them is 0, which means 2x is equal to 0, or x plus 4 equals to 0. Now, here you have to make sure you don't get confused when you solve for x. In the second equation, hopefully you get that. That's just going to be subtract 4, and you get x equals negative 4. But where a lot of times students trip up is because they go through it too fast and they look at 2x and they think, okay, negative 2. But that's not right, because it's not 2 plus x, it's 2 times x. Okay, because this is really times here. So in order to cancel the 2, you need to divide both sides by 2, right? Not subtract negative 2 or something, okay? Which means that this is going to cancel, and then 0 divided by 2, well, that's just 0, okay? So we've got x equals 0 and x equals negative 4. When you write it here or type it, you're going to type x whatever value, but y value should be 0, and same thing, 0, 0 will also be the x-intercept. Okay, let's see if we can put that in. Okay, before we do the domain and range, I want to go ahead and graph, because graphing now is very easy. We've got the vertex and we got a point. Negative 2, negative 8 is a vertex, and let's say 0, 0 is a point. Negative 2, negative 8, and then 0, 0. There you go. There's your parabola. All right. Now let's quickly answer the questions about the domain. Now, the domain is all real numbers because the parabola has no problems. You can always put any x you want in there and it'll always spit out an answer. There will not be any problems with undefined or whatever. So this is going to be negative infinity to infinity. Now, the range is the harder part, okay? Let's get close to the graph and take a look at what's the range. The range is the y values. How do y values change? Now, on the top, you always put infinity. On the bottom, you put negative infinity. Okay, just imagine you tracing the graph from bottom to top, and then you can see what happens, right? So if you start, the smallest value is going to be over here, right? The smallest y value, because it doesn't go further than that. And then it just keeps going up all the way to infinity. Okay? Where does it start? At -8. And so your answer for the range is going to be -8, comma, infinity. Now we just have to figure out whether we put parentheses or square brackets. Now, with infinity, we always put parentheses because we can never reach infinity. We have to go forever. We'll never actually reach it. But what about -8 itself? Are we including that in the domain, in the range or not? Well, yes, we are, because this point, the vertex, is part of the graph. In other words, it can reach -8, which means that -8 is going to be included. That value, -8, is also the smallest, or what they call the minimum value. It doesn't go anywhere below that number. Okay, which means that we're going to type -8, infinity, make sure infinity is in parentheses, and the smallest value is -8 in this case.